Um, this video is going to talk about quoting and paraphrasing and in-text citations, a little bit of help for the second, third, fourth, and fifth papers in our English 002 class. One of the things that I think gives students the most fear is being accused of plagiarism. And a lot of times students are worried about what they're doing, how they're doing too much, and other times they're not worried enough. And so I thought I'd give you a little bit of a pointer guide for how to do that and how to avoid being a plagiarist. And so I put up a PowerPoint that's called Quoting and Paraphrasing. And this is all according to MLA, the Modern Languages Association rules. Those are the rules we're going to be using to write papers 2 and 3 and 4. And we will have a little bit of time with that as we go along. Remember, I'm not looking for absolute perfection. I would love for you to get the hang of this early on so that your other English classes and other classes that you have in college are easier to work through. You're not worried as much about how to do this, what to do this. And I want to remind you about the Purdue OWL, the Online Writing Lab. They have all the most up-to-date ways to cite whatever source it is you have, whether it's internet source or a book source or a magazine or an article or a personal interview or a blog, or even things like Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and that kind of stuff. If you go there and you click on the MLA citations, it'll walk you through. You can just scroll down and find a template for whichever thing you're doing. Now, I know a lot of our library, a lot of places will have a here's how you cite this at the bottom. And that's all well and good, and they're usually pretty correct, but you are responsible for the correctness in your own paper, so make sure you check. It's not a valid excuse to say, well, that's how they told me to do this. Well, you have resources to find out if they're correct. Don't take their word for it. For quoting and paraphrasing, if you don't have that particular PowerPoint up on your screen or printed out yet, go ahead and do that. I like to do they're all guys, sorry, 3 slides per page. It gives you a place to write some notes and obviously uses less paper. Every time you use somebody else's ideas, not just their exact words, but their ideas, you have to give them credit. Or you've stolen their ideas, and that's called plagiarism. And that can get you in a lot of trouble academically and ethically and all of that. But the big deal is I want you to know how and when to do this. Of course, anytime you use direct language from somebody, whether you're quoting their conversation or whether you're quoting a line or a phrase or even a paragraph from something that they've written, you need to give them credit. And there's a special code of doing that, so that in your particular paper, you don't have 2 or 3 lines of information every time you use somebody's work. And so what we do in the MLA work is we want to know who said it and where can I find it. And so we have 2 ways of getting at that. One is your in-text citation, which is just a little parentheses, okay, the normal parentheses, with the author's last name and then the page number it comes from. Now, if you have a website or you're looking at an interview, of course, it's not going to have a page number. But to show us that you're supposed to have a page number, okay, you put N period P period for no page, and then close up the actual parentheses. One of the things that you have here is the quote. Anytime you have a quote, anytime you're using direct words and you put them in double quotation marks every time, we're really good about putting the first one in and then we forget to close it off. Tell me exactly their words, put it in quotation marks. If you're changing words or adding words, or maybe you're only doing a block here and then you're skipping a bit and then another block here, do your block, dot, dot, dot. And that's the only time you have to use the ellipses, the three dots. We know that you're not quoting their whole paper. Okay, so you don't have to have dots before your quote. You don't have to have dots after your quote. You choose which words you're going to use and choose their best words. Okay, if you can say it better yourself, then do so. If you can't, their words are striking or very important and get at something that it would take you longer to work on than they did. Use their quotation. If it's short, and by short I mean less than 4 lines, in your actual paragraph, it just kind of runs along with the rest of the sentences. You have your quotation marks, and then you have your parenthetical at the end, and then the period goes out here. Okay, so it's quotation, parentheses, last name, number, page number, the other parentheses, and a period. Now, you've learned already that a period signals the end of the thought, the end of the idea. And so that parenthetical, which is what we call the in-text citation, that thing in parentheses belongs with the previous wording. So the period has to go outside of that. If you put the period first, you're saying that parenthetical goes with the next sentence, and it doesn't. So make sure if you have short quotes, less than 4 lines, that you have your parenthetical citation. If you have a very long quote, more than 4 lines, first of all, make sure that it's necessary to have the whole thing. Second of all, there's a special way to do that, to set it up in your paper. And the punctuation part, this is the 3rd slide in this quoting and paraphrasing thing. For long quotes, more than 4 lines, you do what we call a block quote. You double tab. Okay, so every paragraph, you get to the end, you hit enter, and then you hit tab. For a block quote, you're going to hit enter and then tab. So it's going to come in a bigger space. You don't use quotation marks. That extra tab is what signals to us that this is a quote. Go through the whole thing, put a period at the end of your quote, and then put your parentheses. I know, it's weird and silly, but that's how they do it. Making sure I'm going through. The second part of the quoting part is that little parentheses is not enough to tell me where to find this information. And so on your very last page, you'll have what we call a works cited page. And works is plural. Works cited page is a page all by itself. So even if you only have a couple of lines on page 4, hit your Control Enter, give yourself a new page, start works cited. There is a template page up on Blackboard in the Unit 2 down towards the bottom. You can open that, type over things, save as, whatever your paper's title is supposed to be, and then you'll have works cited and all that. For this paper, for paper 2, I want you to have a works cited page, but I've given you that in the template. I've given you the article anyway. I've given you Rice for Thanksgiving in that particular template, and so all you have to do is actually type your paper in. If you have other things that you look at, perhaps you need a definition, or perhaps you talked to Aunt Mary, then you need to cite those as well, and you'll have to put those in yourself. But I can help you out. I want you to make a stab. I want you to try your best to quote correctly and put in your in-text citations, but pay attention to comments and things as we go through these drafts so that you can make corrections. I'm not going to count off for improper citations, but I will count off quite a bit if you don't make any attempt at citations. So better safe than sorry. There are some examples in the actual PowerPoint. Things for just normal citation examples is the 6th slide. Interviews, if you talk to somebody who's, it's not a published piece, you've actually, done a phone interview, you've talked to Aunt Mary about traditions or whatever, that's how you do that. One is slide 7. There's an example of the big block quote on 8. A little bit about ... The ellipses is what they're called. You have an example of that on slide 9. If you have to change wording inside of a quote to make it work with your sentence, sometimes we have to change the tense of a verb. Sometimes we have to explain what it is because it's not really obvious from what's going on. You use the square brackets to insert something of your own into the quote. And there's an example of that on 10. One thing that gets students worried is paraphrasing. Okay, I didn't use their exact words. I put it in my own words. You're still using their idea. And so you need to give that credit. There's an example of that in number 11, in slide 11. Then there are some kind of troubleshooting things about paraphrasing. How do you do it? How do you not do it? Just changing a word or two does not make it a paraphrase. It has to be substantially your wording. And so there's a couple different things that students have trouble with. And that goes from slide 12 and on to 15. And the very last slide in this, slide 17 in this PowerPoint, is an application. So if you want some practice, go ahead and do that. I'll count it as an additional +1 for Unit 2. And if you want to turn that in, send it to me via email and I'll give you that extra credit point. It's practice, so I'd encourage you to do it whether you turn it in or not. That way you have an example of something that works, okay? If you have any questions about how to cite, what to do with parentheticals, how to work with those, send me an email. You can always look up things on the Purdue OWL. If you have a question about this particular presentation and you think it's a question that most people have, pop it into the Q&A forum. I'll be happy to answer things there. You can pop it in anonymously. There's a little button you can click that says, post anonymous. You don't have to post anonymous, but you can. So keep that in mind. Be careful. Give it your best shot at citations. It's always better to have too many or more than you need than not enough. Not enough is plagiarism. And so keep that in mind. Work on this and let me know if you have questions. Okay? Bye. Have a good day.